Have you finished moving out? Don't worry, we'll take good care of Sarah even after you're gone.
That's right. The only one our family needs is Sarah. An over 40 useless wife like you should just get lost. With grins on their faces, my in-laws said this to me. They must think their long-held wishes are finally coming true. However, I pretended not to notice their intentions, gave a polite farewell, and left their house. 3 years have passed since then. I now live near my ex-in-law's house, where Sarah is, quietly believing in my daughter and waiting for the day to come. And finally, the moment I had been waiting for arrived. It came in the form of a flurry of calls from my ex-mother-in-law to my phone. Emily, how could you? Why did you hide this from us? She was screaming hysterically, almost losing her mind. Honestly, I had been looking forward to this call. I kept my composure and responded calmly. Yes, what are you talking about? I already knew exactly what she wanted to say, but I deliberately feigned ignorance to stir up more anxiety. My name is Emily, 43 years old, and I work as a nurse. When I was 21, I caught the attention of the hospital director's son where I worked, and we began dating in secret. Before long, I became pregnant with his child. Despite strong opposition from his parents, I pushed forward for the sake of my unborn child and got married. But after the marriage, we quickly realized how different our values were, which we hadn't noticed while swept up in emotion. When our child was born, my husband started staying out late and eventually stopped coming home. When I confronted him, he simply said staying home was boring. He even blamed me, saying it was my fault for recklessly getting pregnant. As a result, we divorced before our child turned 1. His parents insisted on keeping custody of their heir, and I tearfully had to give up my baby. 20 years have passed since then. Now, I work as a nurse at a small clinic. I've been living alone until last year, but now I have a fiancé. His name is Kevin Anderson, a radiology technician who works at the same clinic as I do. He's 5 years younger than me, just 38. For over 10 years, Kevin and I worked together like siblings, never seeing each other as romantic interests. But recently, Kevin surprised me by asking me out.
Emily, there's no one I trust more than you. I may be an unreliable younger guy, but if it's okay with you, would you date me with marriage in mind?
Kevin said this with a sincere gaze. We'd known each other for so long that he was already aware of my divorce and that I had a child living apart from me. Because it was Kevin, someone I thought of as a younger brother, I wanted to be his support. So I accepted his proposal, and we began dating. A year later, we decided to get married, and I went to meet his family. I expected his parents might disapprove since I was older, and it was my second marriage, but they welcomed me warmly.
Looks like Kevin's finally settling down.
I'm so glad. We honestly thought he'd never find a wife. Emily, please take good care of him. Seeing their smiles made me feel like I could finally find happiness. But it turned out to be the calm before the storm. The reality awaiting me after our remarriage was harsher than I'd imagined. It happened about a month after we got married. A surprising visitor showed up at work.
Excuse me, is there a nurse named Emily here?
I heard a young woman's voice from the reception desk. Something about her voice felt familiar. I was working in outpatient care at the time and quickly rushed to the front desk. The moment I saw her face, I let out a gasp. Sarah? Is it really you, Sarah?
Mom, I'm so glad. I thought you worked here.
The young woman beaming at me was Sarah, the daughter I had been separated from 21 years ago. The last time I'd seen her was at her middle school graduation celebration. Her features were still recognizable, and her voice hadn't changed much, so I recognized her immediately. You've grown so much. How have you been? You're 22 now. So are you in college?
No, I just finished nursing school this spring, and now I'm working as a nurse at a small clinic near Dad's house.
Reuniting with my daughter after so long was overwhelming. It was right after the morning shift ended, so I took Sarah to a nearby cafe to catch up. I was looking forward to spending some quality time with her, but Sarah shared some unexpected news about her life. What brings you here today? I hear your dad's hospital is doing great, but you didn't end up working there. Yes, my ex-husband became the hospital director 5 years ago and expanded its scale significantly. Now it's the top general hospital in town. Since I also work at a hospital in the same area, news about his success inevitably reaches me. But Sarah, with a somber expression, began to talk about her current situation at home.
Actually, Dad recently got remarried, but I just can't get along with his new wife, so I moved out. She's a nurse at our hospital too. So, I was wondering if it's okay for me to live with you from now on?
After saying that, Sarah glanced at my left hand, and her eyes widened. I wasn't wearing my ring earlier since I was at work, but she must have noticed the wedding band on my ring finger.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know you'd remarried too, Mom.
She quickly apologized, but looked down again, her expression darkening. My daughter, who I hadn't seen in so long, had come to me for help. I couldn't bring myself to send her away, so I decided to take her home after work. But before that, I needed to let Kevin in the radiology department know. As his break was almost over, I brought Sarah to the radiology room, introduced her to Kevin, and explained the situation. Kevin listened with a warm smile and looked kindly at Sarah.
Sure, I don't mind at all. I knew Emily had a daughter over 20. Honestly, she's welcome to stay with us as long as she wants.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry for the trouble, but I appreciate your kindness.
Sarah expressed her deep gratitude to Kevin, who had responded so warmly. I felt relieved knowing Kevin so easily accepted Sarah, but what happened next was completely unexpected. Sometime later, on a Thursday afternoon when the clinic was closed, my in-laws made an unannounced visit. Even though it was a weekday, it made sense that Kevin's mom, a homemaker, was there, but his dad too? Apparently, Kevin's father, who had been working at a small company, had recently retired at the age of 70. Now both of them were living off their retirement savings. I wondered what the reason for their visit was. Then Kevin's dad mentioned that they wanted to live with us because their pension alone wasn't enough. Well, live together?
Of course, we'd have you and Kevin move into our home. Oh, by the way, Kevin mentioned that your daughter is living with you now. If that's the case, she's welcome to join too. We wouldn't mind at all.
What could this mean? I understood why Kevin's parents might want to live with their son and his wife, but why include Sarah? I thought maybe Kevin's dad was just being considerate, so I gently tried to decline. Sarah too, I wouldn't want to cause any trouble. But both in-laws smiled and shook their heads lightly.
No need to be so formal. Sarah, wasn't it?
I heard she left her dad's house because she didn't get along with his new wife. It's only natural to help each other in times of need.
Kevin's mom said this kindly. Just then, Sarah returned home from running errands. She looked nervous as she greeted Kevin's parents for the first time.
Hello.
Hello, nice to meet you. We're Kevin's parents. Let's all get along well. No need to feel shy.
Kevin's dad extended his right hand for a handshake. It seemed to ease Sarah's nerves. It really seemed like they were ready to welcome Sarah as part of the family. Their warm gestures made me happy, and I decided to move in with them. However, after we started living together, Kevin's parents and even Kevin himself gradually began to change. Even after moving into their home, I continued working as usual. Our dual-income household had been running smoothly, but ever since moving in, there were endless challenges. For one, Kevin's retired father was home all day, and I was now expected to prepare 3 meals daily for everyone. This meant prepping lunch before heading to work and making dinner ahead of time. On top of that, their house was quite old and large, requiring a lot of cleaning and maintenance. Kevin's dad seemed to think it was only natural for the daughter-in-law to handle all the household chores and didn't seem to mean any harm. To make matters worse, Kevin's mom declared that since I was the lady of the house, she started taking part-time jobs, almost as if to escape from the household responsibilities. Honestly, instead of her being considerate in this way, it would be more helpful if she stayed home and looked after Kevin's dad. Saying there's no need for 2 homemakers, Kevin's mom ended up dumping all the household chores on me. However, seeing me struggle, Sarah often helped out. Everyone in the family treated Sarah with kindness. While Kevin's parents ate my cooking without much reaction, they genuinely seemed to enjoy the meals Sarah prepared. And Kevin often bought trendy items like bags or accessories to give to Sarah as gifts. I was grateful for how much everyone valued Sarah. But I couldn't help but notice Kevin's attitude toward me had grown colder compared to when we first got married. Even Sarah seemed to sense it. While accepting one of Kevin's gifts, she looked a bit uncomfortable and asked,
Well, thanks. But don't you ever buy anything for Mom?
Kevin ignored the question, his face turning indifferent. He had been smiling at Sarah, but as soon as he glanced at me, he let out a sigh, turned away, and disappeared into his room without a word. I started to feel increasingly alienated, as if I was the only one being overlooked in this house. Still, I convinced myself to endure it, thinking this was a generous family that had accepted my daughter. But one day, after coming home from work, Kevin and his parents, looking unusually serious, called me into the living room, saying they needed to talk. I braced myself, unsure of what was coming, when Kevin suddenly said something unbelievable.
I'm divorcing you, Emily, and marrying Sarah.
What? I widened my eyes in shock and looked toward Kevin's parents. Both of them nodded enthusiastically with smiles on their faces. Why? What's going on? This is so sudden.
Well, Emily, you're already 43, and you don't seem interested in having kids anytime soon, but we want to see our grandkids. So, wouldn't it make more sense to have a younger wife who can give us children?
Exactly. I'd much rather have Sarah as a daughter-in-law, who is a young, great cook, than keep an old, useless one like you hanging around.
I was overwhelmed by their blatant opinions, but Sarah was my precious daughter, someone I'd only recently been able to live with again. I couldn't imagine she'd agree to such a thing. Since Sarah wasn't home at the time, this entire conversation felt suspicious. Did Sarah say she was okay with this? You can't just decide something like this on your own without her input.
We've always treated Sarah well. She won't say no now.
That's right. This is already decided. You're just in the way. Now pack your things and get ready to leave.
Faced with such a sudden and outrageous demand, I didn't know what to do. I decided to talk things over with Sarah. Not wanting anyone in the house to overhear, I sent Sarah a message explaining the situation and arranged to meet her outside. On the following Thursday, we met at a cafe a short distance from the house. I told Sarah everything Kevin and his parents had said.
Mom, you've been through so much, haven't you? I was so shocked when I got your message, but I think I might know why Kevin wants to be with me.
What? Isn't it just because you're younger and a better cook? There's more to it than that. Sarah's serious expression hinted that there was more to the story. She explained her suspicions. Apparently, Kevin had recently attended a medical conference as a substitute for his boss, the hospital director, who couldn't make it due to an emergency. Apparently, Kevin had heard at the meeting that Sarah's father, who was the director of a major hospital, intended for the hospital's future successor to be one of his own children. As soon as I heard that, I understood his real intention, and everything clicked. It seemed Sarah had come to the same conclusion. With that in mind, Sarah made an unexpected proposal.
For now, I'll agree to marry Kevin, but only under certain conditions.
She explained the conditions in detail, and while I worried they were risky, but Sarah had developed a meticulous plan and seemed confident in her chances of success. I decided to trust her. Sarah had grown into an even more capable person than I had imagined. Not long after, Sarah accepted Kevin's proposal, but only under her specific terms. At the same time, I submitted the divorce papers and moved out of Kevin's family home. On moving day, I packed up all my belongings and had the movers take everything to my new place. It wasn't far, just an apartment I'd rented nearby. As I watched the moving truck drive off, I heard Kevin's parents calling out to me from behind.
Have you finished moving out? Don't worry, we'll take good care of Sarah even after you're gone.
That's right. The only one we need in this house is Sarah, an over 40, useless wife, like you should leave already.
Kevin's parents said this with smirks on their faces. They must have thought their long-held wish had finally come true. But I pretended not to notice their intentions and responded politely. Well then, I'm heading to my new place. Thank you for everything during my short stay. With those parting words, I left their home. 3 years have passed since then. Although I still live near Sarah and my former in-laws, I quietly trusted my daughter and waited for the right time. Finally, the moment I'd been waiting for arrived. It started with a barrage of persistent calls from my ex-mother-in-law to my phone. Since I was at work, I initially ignored them, but the calls were so relentless that I finally picked up. The moment I did, she started yelling hysterically.
Emily, how could you? Why didn't you tell us?
I had been waiting eagerly for this call, so I calmly responded. Yes, what is this about? Though I knew exactly what she wanted to say, I pretended not to know. My ex-mother-in-law raised her voice even louder.
Don't act dumb. Kevin endured for 3 whole years. And now this.
So, what are you trying to say? Please be clear. Feigning ignorance, I was pushing her to reveal her true intentions.
It's about your former in-laws. Why isn't Sarah the heir? We were told the hospital director's child would take over.
Oh, are you talking about that general hospital? The director there is my ex-husband, but the true successor is his sister.
What? Then, the child of the director isn't the heir?
Her voice started trembling. That's right. The successor is my ex-husband's sister's son. He's 5 years older than Sarah, and a respected internist who graduated from medical school. Hearing my response, my ex-mother-in-law seemed utterly disheartened. Who became the hospital's successor had nothing to do with her, but she still seemed distressed. By the way, what do you mean by saying Kevin endured for 3 years? What exactly did he endure? Of course, I already knew about it from Sarah. Still, I pretended to be clueless and asked, causing my ex-mother-in-law to falter and hesitate. So you have nothing to say in return, huh? Then let me explain. By 3 years of patience, you mean Kevin waited that long to get married, right? But wasn't it obvious that Kevin never actually loved Sarah in the first place?
Oh, no, that's not true.
Her sudden panic made me smirk as I pressed further. So I was right, wasn't I? Both Sarah and I knew all along. That's why Sarah agreed to the marriage, but set the condition that Kevin had to wait 3 years. And Kevin didn't even flinch because he thought waiting was worth it as long as money would come his way. Isn't that right, Kevin? And you too as well.
What nonsense. Stop accusing us unfairly.
My ex-mother-in-law tried to deny it, but I wasn't buying it. Here's the truth behind Sarah's proposal. Kevin wanted to marry Sarah because he mistakenly believed she was the heir to the town's top general hospital. He thought marrying her would automatically make him the heir, allowing him to take over the hospital effortlessly as a son-in-law. Sarah could have easily avoided the marriage, but predicted that Kevin would relentlessly pursue her if she outright rejected him. So she pretended to agree to the marriage, but set the condition that he had to wait 3 years. Her reasoning was to test whether Kevin, who had quickly moved on to another woman after his divorce, would genuinely cherish her. During those 3 years, she also requested to be treated not as a fiancé or lover, but as a daughter of the household. She added that she would only marry him if she truly felt comfortable with the family during that time. If even one condition wasn't met, she made it clear that there would be no marriage. Kevin easily agreed to these terms. At the time, while my ex-mother-in-law had worriedly about Kevin, the ex-father-in-law reportedly asked him to endure it. Since the ex-father-in-law had received a small retirement package from working at a small business, he seemed desperate for his son to marry into wealth. Because of this, Sarah had been treated with exceptional care by the family during those 3 years. But then came what happened afterward. Sarah told me everything. After 3 years, your family visited her father to formally introduce yourselves, didn't you? And then the director told you that Sarah wasn't the hospital's heir. That must have been quite the shock, huh? When I asked this, my ex-mother-in-law responded tearfully.
Of course, it was a shock. What are we supposed to do now? Kevin thought he'd finally get to work at a major hospital and maybe even become its director. He even quit his job at the clinic for this.
Yeah, I know. I left that clinic when we divorced 3 years ago, but I've heard everything from my former colleagues. Anyway, in a small town like this, medical gossip travels fast. As I chuckled and replied, I suddenly heard the sound of a car braking outside. I could also hear the same sound through the phone. I knew this would happen. Before my ex-mother-in-law called, Sarah had messaged me. It turns out that the meeting with Sarah's father had just taken place, and they were now heading straight to me. Moments later, Kevin and his family jumped out of the car and began repeatedly ringing my apartment's intercom.
Emily, we know you're in there. Open the door now.
Not wanting to disturb the neighbors, I quickly opened the door. Kevin and my ex-in-law stood there, glaring at me furiously.
You knew, didn't you? That Sarah wasn't the hospital's heir.
Well, of course I knew, but there was no reason for me to tell you. Honestly, I never imagined you were planning to marry Sarah just for her money. I said this firmly, causing my ex-father-in-law to momentarily falter. But as if realizing he couldn't back down, he snapped back defiantly.
Fine then. We don't need a worthless daughter like her. We're sending her back with nothing. You and your daughter are completely useless.
Watching him rant, I glanced around curiously. Well, you say that, but Sarah doesn't seem to be here. If you're sending her back, shouldn't you have brought her with you?
Well, that is.
Looking uncomfortable, my ex-father-in-law exchanged glances with Kevin and my ex-mother-in-law. Seeing their awkwardness, I couldn't help but chuckle.
What's so funny, Emily?
Kevin asked, his face puzzled. Barely holding back my laughter at the absurdity of the situation, I responded, "Oh, it's nothing. It's just funny how you say you're sending her back, when really you're the ones who've been dumped."
What are you talking about?
Unable to suppress my laughter any longer, I finally explained the message Sarah had sent me earlier. During their visit, Sarah's father had been suspicious that Kevin's family was up to something. Ever since my divorce, Sarah's father had doted on her and had been strongly opposed to her moving out. However, when Sarah insisted she didn't want to live with them anymore, he reluctantly allowed her to go. He told Sarah to go live with me to ensure she wouldn't be mistreated. But hearing that Kevin intended to kick me out and remarry Sarah infuriated him. I heard from Sarah's message that her father was absolutely furious. That's why Sarah's father told you he wouldn't give his precious daughter to someone like you, Kevin. And you were all turned away at the door, weren't you? Sarah said her dad even threw salt at you as he chased you off. Hearing that, the three of them paled and looked down.
So you knew all along, huh?
Well, it's lucky it only ended with having salt thrown at you. Kevin, you'll need to start looking for a new job now, won't you?
Yeah, but what do you mean by that?
Kevin, seeing my amused smirk, asked nervously. Kevin was about to face the challenge of finding a new job, but I wasn't sure how successful he'd be. This is a small rural town. Bad rumors spread here in the blink of an eye. Unaware of the difficulties Kevin was about to encounter, my ex-in-laws tried to sound confident.
Don't underestimate him. Kevin is an experienced radiology technician. He'll find a new job in no time.
Exactly. We don't need your concern. You and your daughter have been nothing but useless, so don't act high and mighty.
Well, considering they were relying on Kevin's income to support their retirement, it's no wonder they were so desperate for him to get another job. I knew what was likely to happen to Kevin, but I decided not to burst their bubble just yet, choosing instead to let them walk away with their false bravado intact. With a defiant look, Kevin and my ex-in-laws left the scene. They were probably heading home to immediately start a full family job search. Their livelihood depended on Kevin's job even more than he did. A few months later, I received the exact kind of message I'd been expecting from my ex-mother-in-law. I had ignored her repeated calls, so she sent me a message instead.
Please help us. Kevin can't find a job anywhere.
When I didn't respond, she bombarded me with more messages.
Why? Kevin is a skilled and experienced professional. We can't survive like this.
Fed up with her persistence, I decided to spell out the truth in my reply. Well, that's what happens when you anger Sarah's father. The director is also the president of the local medical association, which is why his sister, the head nurse, oversees the hospital. With the president so furious, Kevin has no chance of finding a job in this town. Reading my response, my ex-mother-in-law sent an angry reply almost immediately.
You were hiding something important from us again, you heartless woman.
Then, after hearing from her, my ex-father-in-law and Kevin also started flooding me with enraged messages.
You're a curse. If it weren't for you and your daughter, Kevin wouldn't be unemployed. Take responsibility.
Emily, you never tell us the most crucial things. I heard Sarah started working at her father's hospital this spring and is even promised a future as the head nurse. Damn it. If I'd known, I'd have treated Sarah much better, you coward.
Yes, Sarah had started working at her father's general hospital in April. Previously, she had been gaining experience at a small, understaffed private clinic her father had introduced her to. This was all to prepare her for becoming a head nurse someday. But if I had told Kevin, he would have gone to great lengths to marry Sarah, even without love. And Kevin's money-hungry parents wouldn't have stayed quiet either. After my divorce, I'd heard from neighbors that my ex-father-in-law, despite his meager salary, would go out drinking almost every night. Meanwhile, my ex-mother-in-law, a homemaker, was often seen buying luxury items when she went into town. With their reckless spending, it's no surprise they ended up desperate for money. They likely would have done anything to ensure Kevin married Sarah. But I wasn't going to let that happen, so I firmly replied to their messages. Fine, call me heartless, or a curse if you like. If my daughter and I are such a burden to you, then let's cut ties once and for all. Sorry for being so useless to you. Best wishes to the three of you. After sending that message, I immediately blocked all three of them, set their numbers to reject calls, and ensured they could never contact me again. It's a small town, so there's always a chance of running into them. But if that happens, I'll just ignore them. If they keep harassing me, people around will just judge them for their behavior. That's how things work in a small town like this. As for Kevin, he couldn't find another job locally and eventually had to move to a far-off area, far enough to be out of Sarah's father's reach. Since his income was crucial for my ex-in-laws, they apparently wanted to follow him. But Kevin refused, saying it wasn't financially feasible to move somewhere where he could support them. Now, they're back to living on their retirement pensions. This family had a bad reputation in the neighborhood, so naturally rumors about them spread quickly. A few years later, I happened to pass by my ex-in-laws' house, and I was shocked by what I saw. The house was so dilapidated that it looked unfit for anyone to live in. When I asked a neighbor, they told me the house was nearly 100 years old and in such bad shape that it couldn't even be sold. The cost of demolishing it would be higher than simply abandoning it. I remembered the leaky roof and creaky floors from when I lived there. However, the room I stayed in with my ex-husband had been renovated, making it just clean enough to be livable. The bathroom and toilet had also been upgraded, making them usable, though the rest of the house was inconvenient. Even when Sarah stayed there as a daughter of the house for 3 years, she was given a renovated room to live in. But now my ex-in-laws were older, with limited mobility, and they likely couldn't keep up with the cleaning. The neighbor said the house was increasingly surrounded by rubble, with a foul smell emanating from it. The local government had reportedly warned them to clean up, but they ignored it entirely. Complaints from the neighbors kept piling up, and eventually, no one wanted anything to do with my ex-in-laws. Unable to bear the smell, they supposedly snuck out of the house late at night. "Oh, so that's what happened," I muttered to myself. A medical acquaintance of mine had mentioned that Kevin had recently been fired from his new job. Apparently, he was constantly causing disturbances by yelling late into the night in the company's housing. Yelling alone seemed odd, but it was likely his parents had shown up uninvited. The housing was meant for one person, so allowing them to stay would have violated the rules. I imagine Kevin tried to kick them out, leading to nightly fights that disturbed the neighbors. They had nowhere else to go. With nowhere else to go, Kevin's parents probably refused to leave. If this happened every night, it must have been a nuisance for everyone around. As for the 3 of them now, they've ended up back in their old house, living amidst the rubble. Though the state of the house makes it nearly impossible to clean, the 3 of them are reportedly tidying up little by little. This is such a small town that rumors about them still spread quickly. At this rate, Kevin might never be able to lead a normal life again. Rumors can indeed be terrifying. Now that everything is behind me, I'm enjoying a peaceful life in the neighboring town with Sarah. Sarah recently got her driver's license and now commutes to her father's general hospital in her own car every day. Although Sarah used to say she couldn't get along with her father's new wife, over time, they gradually became close. It turns out her father's new wife is in her late 20s, which made Sarah feel like she had lost her beloved father to someone else and prevented her from opening up to her. However, her stepmother turned out to be a kind person. After Sarah started working at her father's hospital, her stepmother made an effort to approach her gently. Since they're close in age, they discovered they're fans of the same artist and even planned to attend a concert together. Sarah happily shared this news with me. With that, I have nothing left to worry about. Even though I've failed at marriage twice, I plan to enjoy life with Sarah for the time being. Until Sarah finds her true soulmate, I want to be there as her mother, watching over her journey. With these thoughts, tonight I'll enjoy a cozy dinner with Sarah, sharing drinks and laughter as mother and daughter,